Church History, Part 5. Today, we will be covering the Eastern churches, where they expanded and grew, what happened to them, and where they are today. Many of us are familiar with Western Christianity as it spread into Europe and then globally during the European colonial expansion. As the colonial powers of Europe followed the trade routes through Asia, Portuguese, Dutch, and English colonialists brought along with them missionaries. Many of these missionaries were surprised to find Christian churches throughout Asia. Although their numbers have diminished significantly from their height in the 14th century, they still exist today and can trace their roots back to the apostles. Today, due to the aggressive missionary efforts of the West, primarily from the Protestant revivals in America, Reformation denominations, in particular Pentecostals, we have seen a significant growth in Christian presence in the East. However, we will be looking at the historical Eastern churches, which still exist today, their roots, their rise, and for some, their decline. The three main groupings of the Eastern Church are Eastern Orthodoxy, Oriental Orthodoxy, and the Nestorian Church. You can see on the timeline here where they have some of their divisions there. If you look in the middle, the Council of Chalcedon, down below you see the Nestorian Church, and then if you go to the top you see the Oriental Orthodoxy Church. Then you can see the Eastern Orthodox Church a little bit more to the right in the Great Schism of 1054. You also see the Aksumite Empire and the churches there, which are part of the Oriental Orthodoxy churches up at the top. So that gives you an idea of where we are at the beginning of the Eastern churches. In Church History, Part 3 of our series, we looked at the creeds and the councils and looked at the theological issues over which the churches split. We also looked at some of the political influences on the Christian church, which was originally intended to unite the church, but ended up dividing the church further. And although the basis for the division within the church was theologically, specifically the issue of the divine and human nature of Jesus Christ, there were also political issues which drove those divisions even further. So let's look at the major split in the church, which happened at the Council of Ephesus in 431 AD, where the teaching of Nestorius was condemned, and then officially condemned at the Council of Chalcedon in 451. Now, Nestorius was the bishop of Constantinople, which was a position which held the same precedence as the Pope in Rome. Now, as such, there were competing bishops who wanted his post. The theological controversy at the time was over the divine and human nature of Jesus. And as you will remember in part 3 from our series, Nestorius believed that Jesus had a divine and human nature, but the two did not intermix. Now, rival bishops who wanted to overthrow Nestorius saw an opportunity to have him condemned and take the position as Bishop of Constantinople for themselves. Two groups of bishops sought to take the bishopric of Constantinople from Nestorius. You have the Alexandrian bishops and the Antiochian bishops. Three groups held significantly different views on the divine and human nature of Jesus. So we have a little illustration of the three main views. So these three groups, so the Alexandrian and the Antiochian, were competing to steal the bishopric of Constantinople from Nestorius. So you will remember that Nestorius, he argued that the divine and the human natures did not intermingle or mix. So you have the one person, Jesus, but the human person and the divine person, they did not intermingle or mix. Now, the Alexandrians, there in the middle, they believed that the divinity of Jesus must be asserted. They wanted to emphasize the divinity of Jesus, even at the expense of his humanity. So you see, you have the person of Jesus, but they emphasize the divine person, and they minimize the human person. Then you have the Antiochians teaching, which taught that Jesus was divine, but not in any way that diminished or overshadowed his humanity. So they were emphasizing his humanity. So there we see the Antiochian representation of Christology. Now, the crazy thing about this issue was that all of them agreed that Jesus was both divine and human. They all agreed on that. The Antiochian and Alexandrian bishops saw the bishopric of Constantinople as a prize to take, and they saw an opportunity to have Nestorius condemned. As a result, Nestorius and those that continued to follow his teaching fled to the east, where they were given asylum in the Persian Empire, at that time known as the Sassanian Empire. We have a picture of the Sassanian Empire at its height in 612 AD. Look at the extent of that empire. It was huge. It was a huge empire. Now, the Persian Empire and the Sassanian Empire was often at war with the Roman Empire. And having taken refuge in an enemy empire to Rome, this exasperated the tension between the Nestorians and the rest of the church. The Sassanian Empire was the last Persian empire before the Muslim conquests. The Nestorian church struggled to maintain connection with the church in the West due to this political tension. Now, although the Sassanian Empire was Zoroastrian, that was its original religion, Christianity became an allowable faith in 409 AD. So it became very convenient for Nestorius to flee there in 451. When Nestorius himself fled to Persia, he was welcomed with open arms. Nestorians established centers of study in Persia, which became the theological center for the churches in the Far East. The Nestorian church has the most successful missionary expansion in the history of Christianity. Who knew that? Anybody know that? Surprise, surprise. They would send out self-sufficient communities to travel across Asia, evangelizing and planting new communities. Nestorians were well learned and were the first to translate into Arabic some of the works of the ancient Greek philosophers, as well as Bible translations and biblical texts. They rose in favor with the government, and they provided accountants for them, physicians, astrologers, and philosophers. Nestorians spread across Asia all the way to Japan and had converts in the highest courts of Mongolia and China. This is a map of the extent of the church. Look at that. Right across Asia. And all the little dots on those are patriarchal sees, metropolitan sees, bishoprics. Those are all the major centers of Nestorianism across Asia. Look at how extensive that is. It was huge. It was huge. The largest missionary movement and also the largest Christian presence geographically in the history of Christianity. Now, as the Mongolian Empire swept across Asia, the Sassanian Empire fell to the Muslims and the Mongols. Now, Nestorian Christianity, fortunately, had already established itself in the Mongolian Empire and had enjoyed incredible favor and success. Overall, Mongols were highly tolerant of most religions and typically sponsored several at the same time. Many Mongols had been proselytized by the Church of the East since about the 7th century, and some tribes primarily, their primary religion was Nestorian. In the time of Genghis Khan, his sons took Christian wives, and under the rule of Genghis Khan's grandson Mongke Khan, the primary religious influence was Christian. That's from Weatherford. And so there's a picture of Mongke Khan and his Christian wife. The success of the Nestorian church was so great that Muslims accused Nestorians for being arrogant. We can see by the map how extensive and prolific the Nestorian church truly was. The Nestorian church had even reached Japan, where they had established churches and communities. The first Christians to reach Japan was in 198 AD. And today, one can see Nestorian symbols embedded in the foundations of Buddhist temples. The Buddhist temples were built on top of Nestorian churches, which had been burned. You can actually see in some of the foundations in the stones, you see the Nestorian markings in the foundations of Buddhist and Shinto temples in Japan. Now, one of the famous Asian symbols is the God Gate, or Tori. Remember we looked at that last summer, right? And the Tori, as it's called in Japan, has been used by Christians throughout Asia. It was actually a well-known Christian symbol for the Christian underground as well. Now, a well-known Christian symbol in Japan particularly is the Trinitarian Tori, a three-sided Tori. Here's some pictures of restored Toris. They're actually built on, these Toris had actually been burned, and so they were rebuilt, and they've been continuously rebuilt, and so the history has been maintained. Now, former Kyoto University professor Sakai Ikeda wrote in the Japanese newspaper, the Japan Times, that through the Church of the East, the missionary enterprise of the Christian faith flourished in Japan and exerted not a little influence on the culture. Also, the temple in Kyoto, Uzumasa-dera, is one of the names given to a Kyoto temple long thought to have been a place of Christian worship. Even today, there are remnants there indicating its Christian past. Built at the beginning of the 7th century, the temple, better known today as Koryuji in Kyoto. Kyoto is a very famous temple and religious city in Japan. This temple was founded by Hata no Kawakatsu, a member of the influential Hata family, who are thought to have arrived in Japan from Korea in AD 400. Kyoto professor Ikeda claims that the Hata clan were from Turkestan. The Hattas were a Nestorian tribe who migrated to Japan via China and Korea in search of religious freedom. The temple also housed a shrine to Saint David, a holy well upon which stood a sacred tripod symbolizing the Holy Trinity. That was the, if we go back one photo, that's the one on the right there, the Tori on the right. And it still can be seen today. The success of the Nestorian Church in the East cannot be understated. Unfortunately, they met a tragic demise which so drastically reduced their numbers, they've never recovered and remain today as only small enclaves. During the 13th century, the conquering Mongols supplanted the Muslim caliphs, and the Christians, they basked in the favor of their new rulers. The Mongol conqueror, Halugu, was the first in Western Asia, and he is said to have been baptized by the Nestorians. Part of his conversion and favor towards Christianity may have been to offset the Muslims. Now, his successor continued this tradition, and like we saw, the church flourished. But eventually, Mongol power began to fade. In Western Asia, Muslims took over, and they took revenge on the previously favored Christians. Then to the east, the Ming dynasty in China threw off their Mongol rulers, and with them severely persecuted the Christians as they were linked to Mongol rule. This led to the demise of the Nestorian Church. Religion has always been tied to and used by the political powers at hand. This tip in political favor crushed the Nestorian Church, which never truly recovered from this severe blow. So, after Nestorius was condemned, fled to Persia, enjoyed unprecedented expansion across Asia, it suffered equal loss in the Muslim and Chinese reconquering of Asia. So, how many of you have learned something new about the Nestorian Church? How many had never heard of the Nestorian Church before? Yeah, a lot of us, eh? Interesting. Let's move on to the second Eastern Church. So we have the Nestorian Eastern Church. Now we're going to talk about the Oriental Orthodox Church. Does anyone know what the word Orthodox means? That's right. Conforming to the established, accepted, and traditional doctrines of a given ideology, faith, or religion. All right? So when they say this is an Orthodox church, it is going right back to the Apostles' Creed and the Nicene Creed, churches that hold to those original creeds. Now, shortly after the Council of Ephesus condemned the teaching of Nestorius, the Council of Chalcedon in 451 reinforced and officially condemned Nestorius, and then they continued the debate on the divine and human natures that existed in Jesus. So first they dealt with Nestorius. Get out of here. We don't like the way you do it. So we're going to continue the discussion. And this ended up in the division of Oriental Orthodoxy, which broke away from Chalcedonian Christianity. I think we have a map here as well with the timeline. So we're looking at 451 right in the middle. So you see, this is where Oriental Orthodoxy breaks off. So first the Nestorian Church was booted out, and then Oriental Orthodoxy took off on their own, and because they didn't like the definitions of the nature that the Chalcedonian Christians had determined for the nature, the divine and human natures of Jesus. So they went off on their own. And that exists of the Coptic Church of Alexandria, the Egyptian Coptic Church, the Ethiopian Church, Eritrean, Syriac, Armenian, and Malankara churches. Now, the Oriental Orthodox Church officially recognizes the first three councils, the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, the Council of Constantinople in 381, and the Council of Ephesus in 431. They reject the Council of Chalcedon in 451. Oriental Orthodox Church, the Coptic Church of Alexandria in Egypt, Ethiopian Orthodox, Eritrean Orthodox, Syria, also the Jacobite Orthodox Church, Armenian Orthodox, and Malankara, the Indian Orthodox Church. Now, existing alongside these churches were the churches of the Eastern Roman Empire called the Byzantine Empire. So the Roman Empire at this time as well, they were having divisions. It was broken up into East and West. And so you have your Oriental Orthodox churches in the East, but then you have your Eastern Orthodox Church, which remained with the Roman Empire. Sounds confusing, right? Yeah, but not anymore, right? Because I just explained it, right? Ahaha. So, one of the famous Oriental Orthodox churches is the Aksumite Church of Ethiopia. Do you recall the Aksumite Empire that we looked at briefly in our introduction to Christianity? Remember the Aksumite Empire? The Aksumite Empire was a powerful North African trading nation based out of Ethiopia and had extensive trade routes throughout Africa, the Mediterranean, and throughout Asia via the Silk Road. So there's the Aksumite Empire you see there. And then if we go one more slide, we can see its extensive trade routes, again following the Silk Road. So what happened in the Aksumite Empire, again followed throughout Asia via the Silk Road. The Aksumite Church still exists today. Did you know that? Yeah, the Aksumite Church still exists today and is mostly known for its famous church of Our Lady Mary of Zion, which we have a picture of. Our Lady of Zion, right there. You know where that's located? The city of Aksum in Ethiopia. Who knew? Did anybody know that? Wow. Church is a lot bigger than we thought, isn't it? It's located in the town of Aksum, Ethiopia, and being the most important church in Ethiopia, it is rumored to contain the Ark of the Covenant. The relationship between Israel and Ethiopia has deep historical roots going all the way back to King Solomon, who had a very close relationship with the Queen of Sheba. Right, exactly. Queen of Sheba, Ethiopia, 1 Kings chapter 10. During the Muslim conquests, The Oriental Orthodox churches, the Syrian, the Alexandrian, the Ethiopian, and Eritrean churches, again, they all suffered tremendous losses. They did receive, however, what was called dhimmi status under the Muslim rule, which is subjugated protected status under Muslim rule. So they survived, and they exist to this day, but have struggled to grow under their severe conditions. Now also, the Malankara Orthodox Church in India also continues to this day, but along with the other churches in the East, it has suffered and has stunted growth due to the political climate. It still operates today and has beautiful churches throughout India, which we have some photos of the Malankara churches. They have extreme diversity in their architectures. Look at those. So these are all along the Indian coast primarily. Now, during the 16th century, Portuguese merchants and colonists came across the Malankara Church in India as they established trading ports there. The Jesuit missionaries of the Portuguese put pressure on the Malankara Church to come under the authority of Rome. But when they refused, they were persecuted by the Portuguese and the Jesuits. But who came to their rescue? Does anybody know? Come on, where are my Christian Reform people here? It was the Dutch. The Dutch came to the rescue. It was the Dutch East India Company defeating the Portuguese in supremacy of the spice trade in Malabar in 1663. So the Malankara Church used this opportunity to escape from Catholic persecution with the Dutch East India Trading Company's help. There we are. Did you know that about your Dutch history? No. Did you know about the Malankara Church? No. Aren't you glad you came to church this Sunday? The Armenian Orthodox Church now, again, these are all part of the Oriental Orthodox churches. The Armenian Oriental Orthodox Church is one of the most ancient Christian communities. The church is said to have been planted by the missionary journeys of Jesus' disciples Bartholomew and Thaddeus. It's also the home of the Echmiadzin Cathedral, which is the oldest Christian cathedral in the world. Look at that. Isn't that interesting? Who knew that the oldest Christian cathedral was in Armenia? Wow. That's just fantastic. Christians had been severely persecuted by Armenian kings, first under King Khorazov first, and then by King Tiridates III. It was a man by the name of Gregory the Illuminator who converted King Tiridates III and saw Christianity become the official state religion of Armenia. In what year, do you remember? It was the very first country that Christianity became the official state religion in. Yes, 309. Well done, Glenn. 309 AD, Armenia is the very first country to make Christianity its official state religion. Now, Armenia, story of Gregory the Illuminator. I can't pronounce Draxenakertsi. He's a man who records the history of Armenia. Says this of Gregory the Illuminator. Says Gregory tore down shrines to idols, built churches and monasteries, and ordained many priests and bishops. One day, while meditating in the old capital city of Vergarashpat, Gregory had a vision of Christ descending to the earth and striking it with a hammer. From that spot arose a great Christian temple with a huge cross. He was convinced that God had intended him to build the main Armenian church there. With the king's help, he did so in accord with his vision. He renamed that city Echmiadzin, which means the place of the descent of the Holy Begotten. This church, Echmiadzin, is today the administrative headquarters of the Armenian Orthodox Church. Today, the Armenian Orthodox Church is protected in the Constitution of Armenia, partly in response to the Ottoman Turk genocide of the Armenians during World War I. Okay, so now we have looked briefly at the Nestorian Church, the Oriental Orthodox Church, and now we will turn to the Eastern Orthodox Church. You'd think they could have picked some different names, don't you? Now, the Eastern Orthodox Church is also called the Orthodox Catholic Church. How many knew there was more than one Catholic church? All right. So when you say you're Catholic, you can say, well, which Catholic are you? Are you Roman Catholic or are you Eastern Orthodox Catholic? Ha ha ha. They won't even know what you're talking about probably. But you do now. So the Eastern Orthodox Church is also called the Orthodox Catholic Church or the Greek Orthodox Church or simply the Orthodox Church. The Eastern Orthodox Church rose out of the Eastern Roman Empire and had its capital in Constantinople. As the Latin West of the Roman Empire became increasingly competitive with the Greek-speaking empire of the East, tensions rose politically and ecclesiastically within the church. So the churches ended up with a polarized power struggle between Rome in the West with the Latin-speaking empire and Latin-speaking Christianity, and then in the East, Constantinople with the Greek-speaking Christianity and Greek-speaking Byzantine Roman Empire. So each politically and within the church reinforced this division within the Roman Empire. The Eastern Orthodox Church resisted the authority of the Pope in Rome and continued its structure of having a ruling synod, a group of bishops to rule, rather than to a single authority at the head like the papacy, the Roman Catholic Church. The Eastern churches finally broke from the Western churches of the Roman Empire in 1054 AD in what is referred to as the Great Schism. Now, the Pope in Rome was trying to assert his authority and put the Eastern churches under his authority, which the Eastern churches of the Roman Empire completely rejected. This resulted in the Roman Catholic Church with its ties to the Western Roman Empire in Rome, the Eastern Catholic Orthodox Church in the East with its capital in Constantinople under the Eastern Byzantine Empire. Does that make things clear? All right, so it is out of the Roman Empire that comes our Eastern Orthodox Church. Constantinople was the stronghold of the Eastern Catholic Orthodox Church, as well as for the Byzantine Roman Empire. It was the wealthiest city in Europe from the 5th century to the early 13th century. And from there, the Eastern Orthodox Church did extensive missionary work into the Balkans, to the Slavs, up through Moravia, and all the way up into Russia. The Bulgarian king, King Boris, became a Christian, and his son Simeon continued the push of Christianity in the Balkans region. In 917 AD, Simeon established his own ecclesiastical structure, which was reconciled to the Byzantine Empire. So we have a really strong Eastern Orthodox presence there in the Balkans. Then, around 950 AD, the Russian queen Olga was converted to Christianity by German missionaries. But her grandson Vladimir sent for missionaries from the Byzantine Empire, perhaps in efforts to avoid control of the ever-growing Roman Empire to the west in Germany. So the Roman Empire, as Sasha talked about in medieval history, went up through into Europe and hit Germany. So Russia sees an invading Western Roman Empire coming up through via Germany. So Vladimir says, hang on a minute, we don't want to get swallowed up by the Roman Empire here. Let's strengthen our ties to Constantinople and Eastern Orthodoxy. These ties were strengthened by Yaroslav. In 1240, the Mongol Empire had invaded Russia and ruled Russia for 2 centuries. How many knew that? Yeah, the Mongols were pretty amazing. They were phenomenal. So they ruled Russia for 2 centuries. Now, Christianity had become a unifying and rallying point for the Russians and sealed Eastern Orthodox in Russia. To be Russian was to be Eastern Orthodox. Now, today, the Eastern Catholic Orthodox Church is the second largest Christian church in the world. How many knew that? Isn't that amazing? And we had in that photo that's been up there, look at how large the Eastern Orthodox Church is. It's huge. The dark blue represents the high concentrations of Eastern Orthodox. So this includes Russia, obviously, where roughly half of Eastern Orthodox Christians in the world live. They are also the majority religion in the Ukraine, in Romania, and Belarus, Greece, Serbia, Bulgaria, Moldova, Georgia, Macedonia, Cyprus, Montenegro, Abkhazia, South Ossetia, and Transnistria. Phew. There are significant minorities of Eastern Orthodox in Bosnia, Herzegovina, Latvia, Estonia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Lebanon, Albania, Syria, as well as many other countries. How many knew it was that big? It's huge. Now, time does not permit me to go on about many of the details of our Christian families in the East. This is just to give us a snapshot, an idea of how broad and how strong the Eastern churches really were and are today. I encourage you to spend some time learning more about this incredible expanse of Christianity to the East. Did you learn some new things? Yeah. How many learned some new things in our church history series? Yeah. Did you find it interesting? Good. So glad. Glad because this concludes our series on the history of Christianity. We looked at an overview from the time of Jesus to the present day in our first session. We examined the early church fathers and monasticism that Sasha touched on in the second part of the series. We took a look at the creeds and councils, and then the imperial church, and then the medieval church. And today we glossed over the Eastern church. What we have done is we have a global witness of Christianity in its various expressions, its various traditions, in all of its glories and in all of its faults. A mix of genuine faith, as well as those being dragged along through politics, those going to war and those escaping from persecution. We today, us here, are part of a much larger movement of God. How many of us truly knew the extent of the Eastern Church? I didn't until I started studying it. How many realized that the largest church, the second largest church, was the Eastern Orthodox Church? I didn't know that either until I started studying it. And it opens our eyes to how broad the Christian expression truly is. God's been moving in the hearts of people all over the world. And to our shame, we have let minor theological differences divide us. We've used them for our own political gain and our own ambitions. We've pushed each other down and strove to gain prominence and prestige in the name of our Lord Jesus, who exhibited incredible humility and called us to be servants to one another. When considering church history, may it be a reminder of the words of Jesus in Matthew 20:24, where he said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them, but not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first among you must be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many." So let us pray that God would forgive us for missing this mark so drastically. This look at church history is meant to encourage us as we see ourselves being part of such an incredibly huge picture, to learn from our mistakes and take up this challenge that Jesus gives to serve one another. And so, God, we pray, may we see your incredible grace and mercy in our lives and extend it to each other. May we think of our brothers and sisters who have endured incredible persecution and lift them up to you in prayer. Thank you for the record of church history that we have to look back and see your hand, rejoice in the work of the faithful, and see what an incredible legacy that we are a part of. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.